想要在 Small Talk 当中也能够跟同事一起聊最近的 Banking Crisis 吗？在第二单元当中，我们来探索银行之外重要的参与角色以及他们的作用。Just a little side note, 录完节目之后呢 UBS 也就是瑞银以美金32亿的价钱已收购了 Credit Suisse. So let's get back to the episode. Hello, 欢迎来到 Executive Plus 主管与沟通力的 Podcast. I'm Sherry, an educator, certified coach, and style enthusiast.我相信专业有效的沟通是语言跟逻辑的完美结合。
And I'm Nick, a startup consultant, corporate trainer, and late-night gaming junkie. I believe great communication requires the right mindset and solid frameworks.
我们希望带给大家职场英语的技能、跨文化沟通技巧与其他能帮助您成为出色领导者的工具。
Join us each week as we share our experience, research, and methodologies to take your communication and language skills from good to great. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Executive Plus podcast. In the last episode of our podcast, we talked about who are the major players you need to know if you want to discuss the current financial crisis. Today, we're going to talk about the consequences and everyone else who's been affected by this situation.
That's right. So today we wanted to talk about the other key players in this banking crisis. 那当然第一个也就是 the regulator or the government.
Two very similar things that you're going to hear a lot in English would be the Federal Reserve and also the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation.
So Federal Reserve 也就是联邦储蓄银行，它就是负责美国货币跟金融稳定的一个中央银行。And then FDIC 也就是称为联邦存款保险公司。那我们尤其是在这个 Silicon Valley Bank 这件事情当中，他们这个常常出现的 FDIC， 也就是他们其实呢能够保险的金额就是每人是美金25万。
So 250,000 is the current insurance limit, which means if you have money in your bank account below that amount, then no matter what happens to the bank, the FDIC will make sure that your money is returned. But in the case of Silicon Valley Bank, you have a massive number of businesses and venture capitalists or just individuals whose wealth exceeds 250,000. And now the question is whether their money should be returned or not.
And another term that we have to bring it up right away is government bailout. 那这个字呢，其实在2008年的 financial crisis 当中就常常出现，也就是政府的救助。那当时在 financial crisis, I think the government definitely had to bail out a lot of banks. But actually in current case for the SVB, they said that they're not bailing them out.They're just ensuring that the depositor get their money back.
This is a word where you're going to see a lot of reactions because after the 2008 financial crisis where the government did bail out a lot of banks, the investors in the banks didn't necessarily lose their money even if they did not act properly and caused a financial crisis. So for many people, this word is like almost a dirty word.
Yeah.
Like bailout immediately triggers a lot of anger and a lot of resentment towards how the financial system gets run.
So now for our case, let's talk about Credit Suisse. Now, Credit Suisse actually asked help from the Swiss National Bank, and they borrowed $50 billion to try to gain confidence from the public.
This is related to a term we talked about in the last round, which is to shore up your bank accounts. Right. Now, shore up literally means to support. This term originally got used to mean to support a wall. If you're building a wall or you're creating new sections of a building, you will actually shore up walls or you will shore up sections of a building. But in the case of the financial system, they use it all the time to mean to support your bank account system.
Now for SVB, 那我们刚刚就讲到了一个非常重要的 key player, which is FDIC. 那虽然他们保险的金额是美金25万为上限，但是目前 right, I think the government, the Fed actually promised that all the depositors will get their money back.
This is where we start to see that Is the bank being bailed out? Are depositors being bailed out? Are investors getting bailed out? Now we're starting into this debate where both the Secretary of Treasurer and also the President of the U.S. have said this is not a bailout. Again, for most people, this is a dirty word. We're not doing that. But what we are doing is if you're a depositor in the bank, you should be able to get your money out. If you're an investor in the bank, meaning you bought their stock price, or let's say you're an executive with some kind of shares in the company, you are not being saved because you potentially are part of this problem. And that's just how the financial system works. So if you're just a business, a normal citizen who happens to have the money in the bank, you should get it back.
Yeah, didn't Biden said that if you're an investor, you're not getting your money back? We're not making sure that you get your money back because this is capitalism.
So he made statements like that's how capitalism works. But you're still going to see a lot of debates whether how do we term this? And a lot of people are looking at, oh, well, these big tech companies and these wealthy individuals should have known better. Why are they getting money out? This is still a bailout. So this is still definitely a debate that people have ongoing, whether it should go or not. But those two terms and understanding the difference between a bailout in the 2008 financial crisis sense means everybody in the bank is saved versus right now what the FDIC wants to do is just guarantee depositors.
And another thing that I feel like we need to bring it up is the Dodd-Frank Act. Basically, after the banking crisis back in 2008, Obama actually signed the Dodd-Frank Act to regulate banks. But what happened in 2018, 也就是2018年的时候, Trump actually rolled back on some of the regulation.
Now, to be clear, why this is so important in the news is you understand the Dodd-Frank Act was literally created as a reaction to the 2008 banking crisis. And it is very complicated, but to simplify it for discussion purposes, one of the main things that happened was the government put very strict rules on how much liquidity, again, that term will come back over and over, how much liquidity a bank has to have. So that means that they cannot take all of their cash, they cannot take all of their money and then put it into other assets, whether it's put it into the stock market, put it into, well, actually they removed private equity, but the bank couldn't play with all the money. They had to be liquid. They had to have at least a certain percentage of deposits inside the bank in cash in order to serve their customers. Well, what happens in 2018 is that limit gets changed. Before, if you're a bank and you have 50 billion US dollars in your bank, you have to have a very good percentage of that $50 billion in cash to pay your depositors. In 2018, Trump's administration believes this is very hard for banks to give loans because the bank cannot give out a lot of cash because they need to have liquidity. So they increase that to $250 billion. So if the bank is holding more than $250 billion in assets, now that liquidity restriction is in place. Well, that means that Silicon Valley Bank, who just has a few $100 million in assets, can do a lot more with their cash.
Right. So Dodd-Frank Act 其实简单来讲，它就是要确认银行的资金流动性。但是在2018年的这个 regulation 它稍微做了改变了，所以也就是 I think so that means that SVB falls under that, so they don't actually needed to adhere to this Dodd-Frank Act. 那现在就有很多人说 we should go back to what happened in 2008, what Obama signed. There shouldn't be this amendment or the change.
This is going to be an ongoing debate that if you want to take part in the discussion, you actually need to understand pretty well, because back to something we talked about previously, the difference between a GSIB, a systemically important bank, meaning a global, large, very important to the economy, and a regional bank, is that one of the most important things a regional bank does for the economy is they give loans. Loans for your house, loan for your car, loan for your business. And so when the Dodd-Frank Act got pulled back, the argument was, is this allowed banks to have more cash to give loans. But now we're stuck back in, well, they didn't necessarily give loans. They did a lot of other stuff. And was that okay? And did it lead to the collapse?
So now another key players for all the banking crisis would be the accounting firm. 那现在我们当然有个 Big Four, right? And now we're specifically going to look at Credit Suisse accounting firm, their auditors, which is PwC. 那其实 PwC 在这近几年，在他们这个 Credit Suisse 的 financial statement 上面就已经有讲了两个很重要的 phrase, 也就是 material weakness还有 adverse opinion. What does it even mean? So material weakness just means that there is a significant deficiency, which is one or more weaknesses in a company's financial reporting. 那基本上他就在讲这个内部的控制有很多重大的缺失。那当然这个是也在讲我们之前有稍微提一下 Credit Suisse 的 scandals, right? Or 他们的有很多 wealth management clients 开始把他的钱提出来。So that was the material weakness. 那接下来呢有讲到了 adverse opinion. 那 adverse opinion 呢，也就是说 it's a professional opinion made by the auditor indicating that the company's financial statements are misrepresented or misstated. 那在中文来讲呢，这个 adverse opinion 就叫做否定意见。Both of these terms just means that it is a red flags for a lot of investors out there, and that's why their stock prices plummeted over the years.
And so this is one of those situations that for normal people like us who are not spending our days digging through financial statements, we probably don't come across this. But one of the things that you will often see is that someone who really wants to understand the financial health of a company, especially an investor, they will start to look for these things. They'll look for the adverse opinion. They'll look for material weaknesses and consider that when they want to buy the stock or sell the stock. And this goes back into that discussion on what's the difference between an investor versus a depositor, right? In the case of Silicon Valley Bank, a lot of people are arguing depositors, normal people like us, shouldn't be responsible for digging through all of their financial statements and looking for these red flags. Investors, that is literally their job. So when it comes to making people whole and returning the money, this is where they feel depositors should get their money back. Investors should not, because these kind of terms and these kind of red flags, who should be looking for them?
Right. So with the banking crisis, and I have to say it's probably still ongoing, but by this time, there's one sort of acquisition going on for SVB.
So before in our history of SVB and Credit Suisse, we talked about how Credit Suisse got to its position is through a lot of acquisitions. And you're probably going to see this more and more going forward as other banks either get into trouble or other banks start to collapse, they are going to be acquired or bailed out. These are typically two of the directions that they can go. So in the case of SVB, almost immediately after the collapse of the bank, HSBC announces that they are going to purchase the UK arm for, I believe, $1.
What?
Sorry, to be correct, since it happened in London, it was done for £1. And this was actually part of what they considered an excellent strategy in terms of they pull in their commercial banking. It allows them to connect to more technology and science companies. So this is also what we call a fire sale. You may see this term quite a bit going forward, is where certain things need to be sold very quickly and it may be at a loss. We call that a fire sale.
Right, 有点像中文的跳楼大拍卖. Yeah, it's basically at a very cheap price, but obviously HSBC, they gained so many clients through this. Kind of a good deal for him. And for Credit Suisse, now, 这个还在讨论当中. Obviously, Credit Suisse is such a huge bank, and there were talks on how, the Swiss bank may need to eventually save them. 但是大家现在也蛮期待，就是 UBS 能够可能 acquire 他们的 wealth management part. Again, they really want to get rid of the investment banking because it's just not doing well at all. So there's still talks on who's going to acquire them, or the government needs to step in and bail out. So I think as of this moment, I think they're still deciding on that.
There's one more term that you're going to hear quite a bit when talking about this that has to do with what's going forward with this. And that is a term of contagion. And this term actually came up when FTX collapsed in terms of the crypto community and crypto exchanges, that once you have a single entity like a Credit Suisse or an SVB go under, what are what they call second order or third order consequences, which means the immediate consequences, okay, I need to handle the depositors or the shareholders of the bank. The third order consequences is that idea of like, oh, well, if this bank collapsed, are other banks, depositors and shareholders going to feel pressure and then pull their money out of that bank? And now you start to get a contagion, is almost like a sickness that goes from bank to bank.
Just like COVID, right? So contagion 也就是感染啊、传播和扩散. So usually we use it in pandemic, right, for the COVID-19. But now they're using this for financial or banking crisis because one breaks, one collapse, another may collapse, and that's just going to keep going. So contagion 也就是最近也常出现的这个单字.
And not only is it, the news or media using this word, but you'll actually see this word specifically used by, let's say, the government to say, we intend to stop the contagion. We're going to stop it here. If we need to support or lend money to other banks in order to, shore up their balance sheet to help them feel stable, then that's what we have to do. But this is a term that, especially for the next few months, is going to come up over and over again, looking at these second order or third order consequences. What happens because the first thing fell apart? Well, we hope that this starts to give you the right thought processes and the right vocabulary to go have discussions about this or to better understand the news. In our third part of the series, we're going to talk about what kind of crazy scandals led up to the fall of Credit Suisse.
Now, this is an example of what we really wanted to do going forward. 那这是一个 teaser 也就是让大家了解我们在5月的时候希望能够提供一个不一样的服务. We'll talk more about that. 也就是就像类似这些episode 我们做了非常多的 research and analysis 然后能够做一些比较 deep dive 的一些 episode. So this will be like an example what you may see going forward.
We hope that you'll join us for the next episode and let us know what you feel about this format. We're always trying to bring you new ideas or make sure that you have the tools to talk about everything you need to in your professional work life. We'll talk to you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.
The Executive Plus podcast is a Presentality Group production, produced and hosted by Sherry Fang and Nick Howard. You can search us on Facebook, 主管英文 Executive Plus. You can also find us on Instagram, Communication R&D, and email us at sherry@epstyleplus.com.